Hello. I wanted to say good morning to you all, and welcome to the workshop. I wanted to say that we're going to take another few minutes waiting for people to come. It's a damn awful time to start this. It's a Sunday morning and people get up late, so please bear with me and be patient. I will start, but I'm just waiting for a few more people to turn up. It is difficult. They're coming from different parts of Karachi. If you can bear with me. Thank you. Asking you people to wait even for a little while, and I'm sorry that we're running late. I don't know how many of you here are actually engaged in writing and or are interested in doing so, but anyway, the purpose of having such a workshop was to engage you with the business of writing in a very special kind of way. Because, well, let me start by saying that I have, sorry, is the voice will still carry? Can you hear me? Sorry. I'm going to be reading a paper in a minute, which is relevant to what I have to say today. Because certain things can't be said, they have to be spelt out in detail, and this is, what I have to say is very complex, fairly complex at any rate. I have some concerns which I want to express before I start about our democratic culture, the democratic culture of the Western world and other countries, which I'm afraid brings about a situation in which people begin to extol what is mediocre and utterly second-rate. The demos, the people, any Awami setup brings about this state of affairs, and it's very unfortunate. I've been trying to study the phenomenon because the populist hack writing is extolled much of the time, but there is a good reason for this. And the reason is that a lot of writers, a lot of writing is market driven, and there are very few writers as such, who, I see many writers, I know of many writers who are hacks, who are professional writers, but also somewhere just hacks, which is a way of saying the same thing somewhere. And there are very few who are bona fide writers. To me, a bona fide writer is somebody who's not necessarily market driven. He is somebody who is in a state of recoil in relation to society as a whole. Otherwise, to me, he does not really qualify as a genuine artist. And to me, that's a great shame when that happens. So basically, it's about, there's been a sort of traditional kind of conflict between rhetoric and philosophy for hundreds of years, starting with Plato. And I think this somewhere is at the back of this. The market somewhere stands for, is the same as the sophists whom Plato attacks in his dialogues via Socrates. And so Plato standing for representing philosophy, as opposed to rhetoric, which is represented by the sophists, the false philosophers, the ones who market their stuff, the ones who are involved with economic self-aggrandizement. So there is this major major kind of gap between these two types of writers. Those who are writers of commitment and those who are just hacks. And this is a distinction I think it is very necessary to draw, because I am not going to be speaking to hacks or to those who want to be just professional writers. I'm here to speak about art, which is, as I said, the result of a dynamic encounter with society. And I think that is of the essence as far as genuine, good writing, serious writing is, I think is concerned. That is of the essence as far as literature and writing is concerned. So I won't go any further, but I do feel, I'm going to read this paper because I feel it's important that writers bear in mind that what I'm looking for, I teach creative writing, what I'm looking for is a serious commitment to the business of writing, a commitment to write, more than a commitment, even a kind of covenant, if you like, because with art, there's no turning back. If you're a writer who's committed to his calling, then you're not going to turn back. That will be you will write for all of your life, or you will seek to, you will want to. And it must not be a mechanic, the business of starting to write must not be mechanical or fortuitous. It must be a deliberate act. There must be a great sense of purpose there. That is very, very, very important. So these are things I want you to bear in mind at the outset of this talk, because it is very important. And I think this is the right way to be approaching writing, and to approach it with profound respect, because I don't think many people do that today. They just sort of start then, like say, take with the example of fiction, young people, older people just start writing without any idea about it, without really studying the craft, or at the most they do creative writing courses, but even those fall short of creating the kind of commitment I believe is necessary to great art or good art, because there's much that is being written and passed off as literature, which is not literature to my way of thinking. So I have concerns about that, and I think I'm justified in at least speaking my mind on this subject. Anyway, now I will read out a paper I have written for today, which I would request you to listen to carefully, because it's taken me a while to put this together, and there are some important thoughts there. And I think if you are, those present here are genuinely interested, they should bear in mind what I'm trying to put across. Just a second. Haven't we got any light here? There's very little light. Can we not have any light? कोई light ऊपर यहाँ बिल्कुल अंधेरा नजर नहीं आ रहा कुछ रोशनी या कोई लैंप कुछ नहीं यहाँ तो क्या खाक पड़ूंगा अंधेरा घुप नजर नहीं आ रहा वो कैमरा यहाँ रख दे तो कोई लाइट ही आ जाए यहाँ लाइट ही नहीं आ रहा. As it is for today's workshop, Primal Rites, Fiction and its Sources. I want to start by speaking about fiction in its beginnings. As I think this will help, I will look at fiction in a sense wider than normally applied, not just as something which involves the writing of novels, but as an act of the imagination, where we catch primitive man inscribing himself in terms of artificial symbols or images on papyrus, wood, or stone. I refer, of course, to the epochal moment of the advent of writing, which is said to have come about not suddenly, but over a period of time circa 3000 BC. In this moment, besides taking an inaugural step towards self-expression, opening the book of life, if you like, man would also seem to have been initialing a kind of fiction. It is Derrida's view, like that of Thamus, the king of the gods in Plato's Phaedrus, when confronted with the newly invented art, that writing was a mere recipe for disaster, inasmuch as it was only a medium of mechanical recollection and would inhibit the active exercise of memory, of memory or live recall, and result in certain brain death. The brilliance of Derrida's argument on behalf of Plato and speech, notwithstanding the reverse, might hold equally true. Afloat on a talking sea of sound, unable to cast anchor, man might easily have been consigned to oblivion if writing, his desperate gesture towards a furtherance of life had not materialized. A fear of extinction, or at least a desire for self-preservation then, would seem to underlie the foray into writing, the moment of man's self-inscription or his encounter with himself in fictive space. Interestingly, this can also be said to apply to fiction proper, reflecting, as it seems to, an implicit assault on time or death. We see fiction in its infancy, for instance, celebrating heroism in epic verse. There is the example of Homer, of the Iliad and the Odyssey, where feats of courage are glorified against a context of transience and mortality in what seems, with the wanton, self-indulgent Olympians above and Tartarus below, a bleak, amoral perspective. No less ancient, the Old Testament presents a rather different kind of world, or in effect a series of discontinuous narratives from the creation onwards, exemplifying man's moral ancestry. What are celebrated here are the profound tensions generated in the fraught relationship between man and his maker. Time and death are overcome not by heroic exploits, but by divine guarantee, and in terms of a persistent moral struggle. Indeed, as the purported word of God, the scripture itself may be said to embody that guarantee. Here, the prototypes of some of the great themes of fiction are present. The countdown to fictive creation, the first love and murder stories, stories of betrayal and envy, sacrifice and loss. In his novel, Joseph and His Brothers, Thomas Mann points with customary perspicacity to the Old Testament as budding forth patterns of behavior, or behavioral types rather than individuals. These patterns or types being, according to him, infinitely recessive or with no fixed point of origin, available as copy for writers of fiction. Against this backdrop, we come upon the nature, ideally speaking, of the creative act as announced in traditional fiction. In its inception, at least, there must, as in Genesis, be a sense of confronting an abyss. Moreover, if this is where, in whatever form, the narrative I is born, we would also have to posit a frisson, something trembling at the brink. Necessarily then, since this is an extraordinary moment, where a voyage of the unknown is being embarked upon, it would have to be a moment not just kinetic in essence, but variously instinct with turmoil, ecstasy, and terror. Thank you. I would now, before we continue any further, if I would like to, because I think we need to do this, because I don't want it to be just a monologue. I want this to be interactive. I would like you to ask me some pertinent questions about what I have just read out to you. If there's anything obscure, or if there's any question in this regard, please do not hesitate, because a lot of people just don't ask questions, and that's very distressing. So please, please do feel absolutely free to ask questions about what I've said, because to me it is vital that I'm able to reach out to you and to feel that I've reached out to you, rather than, have you there just as a captive audience. I'm sure you're following what I'm saying, but I would welcome questions at this juncture.
Adrian, this is probably a little pedantic, but just correcting the record slightly, referred to the Iliad and the Old Testament as perhaps the most ancient of writings. Minor correction, the Epic of Gilgamesh from Sumeria predates both works by perhaps 2,000 or 3,000 years, and the Veds in India are probably contemporaneous with the Old Testament.
Salman, I have deliberately avoided reference to those, because we were dealing with writing in English and accessibility to writers in England, in the West, and other parts of the world, would have been a little bit of a problem. So I think, why I was focusing on Homer and on the Old Testament is because for Western writers of fiction, as I pointed out in the case of Thomas Mann in his wonderful book, Joseph and His Brothers, which I think you could perhaps consider reading one day. It's a very long book. But in any case, these are themes which are derived, and there are endless themes. And I would repeat what I've said in my paper, that the Bible has all the themes I think we're writing about. All of us write, the first love story is the story of Adam and Eve. I mean, it's Edenic. The whole thing's there before us. Cain and Abel, it's all there. We don't, you have great writers like Shakespeare drawing on so much of the Old Testament and the New, but all the themes all there. It's not as though we're inventing new themes, so they're all there. Anyway, so are there no other questions from the audience?
Yes, please.
Please.
Sir, behind you.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for your presentation. It was very nice to hear you. I'm a researcher on comparative religion, and I found it very interesting to hear what you had to say about the Old Testament being the source of fiction. I want to know your view on a text that predates the Old Testament in terms of being containing the archetypes that you mentioned, the scrolls of Hammurabi. What is your view? You mentioned the Old Testament as the,
Well, I mentioned it because I felt this has been a very genuine source. It's among the sources of fiction. I don't know that I'm not aware that other sources have made themselves available. Earlier, they may be doing so now, but I don't think that, like, for example, in the case of Joseph and His Brothers, that's the obvious example, but there are endless other examples. What is it called? The Three Faces of Eve? What is the book? Eve, the Three Faces of Eve. There's so many, and they're endless books, so one can't sort of think of them offhand, but there's an endless number, there's an endless amount of fiction that's been written drawing on the experiences recounted in the various narratives, endless narratives in the Bible. So the Bible does stand very, very significantly as copy, as very definitely readily available copy for writers of fiction. That's what I was trying to point out, that we are not inventing. What I'm trying to say is we're only reproducing whatever's there. and sort of, you know, saying it
The
in different novel kind of ways.
The archetypes are all there.
Yeah, but the prototypes all there.
Prototypes,
The
that's right,
prototypes
that's
all there. We're